Hey everybody, welcome to my C++ tutorial. Today we're going to be making a slot machine through the console. Let's get started. I'm going to be using CodeBlocks as my IDE, and we can go ahead and name this project as Slot Machine Game. This tutorial is going to be a bit advanced, so if you want to pause the video anywhere and go ahead and feel free to do so and just look at the code. So first off, we're going to get started with all the includes that we're going to be needing. And I'm just going to go ahead and set up all the basic stuff here. I'm going to be making a wheel header file, so we can go ahead and include that as well. I'm going to start with a money variable, which we're going to need for the player, and we're going to make that a global variable so that we can manipulate it anywhere. We're also going to be making a couple functions to make our life easier, so we can call them over and over again. We're going to be making a print screen function, a gameplay function, and 3 win condition functions. The print screen function is basically just going to print out all of the numbers in the wheel, and the gameplay function is going to be our loop, and it's going to allow us to actually generate random variables for the wheel each time. I'm also going to be making a winning function so that we can call it whenever the player wins, and we're going to be passing the money variable by reference so that it actually changes what we put into it. And I'm going to be making this game so that you can have as many wheels as you request. So we're going to be making a REQ integer, and that's going to change the amount of wheels depending on how much the player wanted it to be. And so we're going to console out the number of wheels and then console in REQ. And we're going to make a for loop that's going to go up until REQ, and it's going to push back a new wheel for our slot machine. And since our slot machine is a vector of wheel pointers, then we have to use a new keyword. Then we have the number of wheels, and I'm just going to make that a variable so that we don't have to keep calling size on slot machine, and we can use the number of wheels. I'm going to be making a boolean variable game playing to true, and that's going to keep the loop running until our player doesn't want to play anymore, and then it's going to be set to false. And then we can go ahead and initialize all these variables, starting with the bet and the betting rows that the player wants to bet on. And the betting rows is going to have to be a number between 1 and 3, and that's going to be the amount of rows that the player wants to risk their money on getting it a winning condition. And so we're going to make a while loop, and we need to make sure that the money is greater than 0 in order for the player to actually keep playing. And then I'm going to make another while loop embedded into this one that's going to be the player's choice to keep playing the game or not. And we have a system clear, and that's basically just going to type clear into our console each time. And you should change this clear to CLS if you're running this on Windows. So we're going to be entering the beginning of the round, and the player enters in their bet amount, and then the first thing we should do is subtract the bet from their money, and then we can go ahead and call the gameplay function, and that takes in the number of wheels that we have and also the slot machine vector that we're using, which is just called slot machine. I can go ahead and set up this condition here that if the money is less than or equal to 0, then they automatically lose, and then we can set the game playing variable to false. And then I'm just going to set sleep here so that the screen just doesn't disappear instantly if they lose and change. Now we're going to make some if conditions that will allow the player to have their bet on different rows. Now I'm going to have to set up 3 different if statements, and they're going to be if the betting row is less than or equal to 1, 2, and 3. And those are each going to call their respective win condition functions. Now up here I forgot to set the random seed for time, and to do that you just say srand of time 0. Now we're going to go back up to files and make a C++ header file, and we can call that wheel.h. And we're also going to need a source file for our header, so we can say wheel.cpp. Now this is where we're going to put our wheel classes. So I can start off by saying class wheel, and then we have some public functions that we need to put in, obviously the default constructor, and we're also going to have an update function, get first, get second, and get third for the wheel. The variables the wheel is going to have is we're going to have a cycle and also a place tracker, which is going to keep track of our place in the wheel. That's all we need for the class for now. For our wheel.cpp, we actually have to implement these functions, and the default constructor for the wheel, I'm going to populate the cycle, and we're going to make a for loop for that, and this is going to go through the cycle and assign it to basically a random value. And if you divide by 2, that's going to change the difficulty because it's going to lower the total possible amount of numbers we have. And here we have to shuffle the cycle, so that's going to change each wheel to be different and random. So we need to have the amount of shuffle times we're going to shuffle this, and we're basically just going to be swapping 2 parts of the cycle in order to switch 2 different variables that are part of our cycle array. And we're going to do that a random number of times, and then we also need to remember to initialize the place tracker variable to 1 in our default constructor. Our update function is going to update the wheel. It's going to turn it 1 rotation, and so we have to make sure that the place tracker is 8 or less because we're going to be console outing 3 different values per wheel. We're also going to need get first, get second, and get third. And let me type these up real quick. Basically what these get first, get second, and get third functions for the wheel are going to do are return the place tracker index of our cycle, and those are going to be our first, second, and third spots for our wheel. Now I'm going to go back to our main CPP file, and we're actually going to have to implement all of these functions that we declared in the beginning. So I'm going to copy paste those down here, and then we can write the actual code for them. Our print screen is going to take in the amount of wheels that we have and also our slot machine vector. It's going to clear the screen each time, and then we're going to have a for loop that's going to go through each element of our slot machine and say get first, and then we have to type in a place tracker, a space between our first and second spots for the wheel. Then we have to console out our second and third indices for each wheel. So we're going to write a for loop for each one of those. And then I want to keep a running track of the amount of money that the player has. So we're going to see out their monies, and then we have to use the scope operator to go to the global scope for the money, and then we're going to print out a new line. And that's all we need for the print screen function. For our gameplay function, we're going to spin each wheel for a random amount of time. So I'm going to say that while time is greater than 0, we're going to make a for loop that goes through each wheel for the slot machine and updates it. And remember, our update was turning our wheel. Then we're going to print the screen, and then we have to sleep between each console out of the printing screen in order for it to look more animated and fluid. And then I'm going to decrement the time so that it eventually runs out. I'm going to keep track of the stop count and J, and this is just going to make our wheels so that they cascade and it looks nicer and more like a genuine slot machine. And this is going to basically stop the first wheel, and then every other wheel after that is going to stop after a random amount of time, eventually until you get to the last one. So I'm going to make a while loop for the stop count as long as it's less than n, and then a nested for loop so that our slot machine increment is going to go up by 1 each time. And then I'm just going to reprint out the screen and then increment the stop count so that it eventually stops. And again, we have to do a uSleep in order to make sure that the console looks more fluid. Now we're done with our gameplay function, and we have to make all of our win conditions, and that's basically just going to check that each wheel for each number on each slot machine is the same. So if we want to check our first win condition, we're going to be accessing the first slot machine and make sure that the first number on the wheel is going to be the same as every other first number for the wheel. And so we have to make a for loop, and we're going to be passing in the number of wheels that we have. So as long as I is less than n, then our for loop will keep going. And we have an if statement in the middle of here, and if these are not true, then it's going to return false. And so all of our win conditions are the same, except for instead of the first, second, and third indices, we're going to be, or instead of only the first indice each time, we're going to be doing the first, second, and third. And that's all we have to do for our win conditions. Our winning function is just going to add money for the amount that that we betted times the number for the middle slot machine value. And it's just going to do a cout of winner and then how much money that they won. So let's try running this program, and I see I missed a semicolon here, a few, and I also, let's see, and I also forgot to include all of my include files in my wheel.cpp. And once I run it, then the program works. So let's do a demo. I'm going to start the round and enter 50 as my bet and hit enter, and as you can see, the slot machine will keep turning and eventually it's going to stop. And I didn't win this time. What a surprise. So this program is pretty basic. There's more stuff you can do with it. If you wanted to, you can make it so that the game mechanic runs a little differently, or that you can quit the game a little bit easier, if it's easier to win the slot machine. But I'll leave that as an exercise for you. Alright, have fun coding. Goodbye.